So the goal for today's call is to talk about how to step into AI as a revenue operator, right? Whether you're in marketing operations, revenue operations, a systems admin, or a go-to-market leader. One of the number one questions we are getting from existing customers with us, we've worked with over 250 growing and scaling companies, or prospects or folks in our network is, hey, I bought Claude, now what? And so what we're going to try to do is provide a framework that you can use to thoughtfully step into this. And co-piloting with me today is Patrick Cohen, call him PC. We've worked together for a long time. I mean, here, OneTrust, Conversant, 3 different companies together. He's our enablement service lead. So PC, you want to do a quick little intro and then we can dive in?
Yeah, thank you. So I run kind of the enablement guru over here, working with a lot of organizations over the course of my career, standing up enablement programs or design and development programs. And of course, over the course of the last year, AI has been everything and anything, and pretty disruptive, but I think in a positive way, and have seen a lot of good things come of it, but have also made many mistakes, and definitely have learned from those mistakes. And I think that's where a lot of the best lessons come from. So happy to share those lessons learned.
Cool. Appreciate it. All right, let's jump in. So one of the first things we need to do is, and because we're going to piggyback on this quite a bit, for those of you that have been to one of our webinars before, I apologize. You've probably seen and heard this 100 times now. But the way that we think about revenue operations or go-to-market operations is that it sits across the entire customer journey. So it's your marketing ops, your sales ops, your customer success ops, all in alignment with your product and finance, right? And the framework that we use, which we're going to lean on pretty heavily throughout this, is strategy, process, technology, data, enablement. And the idea is that AI is truly sitting across all of that. And you need to baseline this first, because otherwise you're just randomly pointing AI at use cases or problems that may not actually require solving, and getting an understanding of your existing go-to-market operations framework is helpful, because one of the very next things that we recommend all of our customers do, all of you do, is ask yourself, where is your business in the RevOps lifecycle, right? I'm sure that there are other frameworks out there. I don't know of them, but the way that we think about it is, are you in the build, grow, or scale stage? And if you're in the build stage, right, the problems that you're tackling are building a lot of the foundation, right? The questions that you're able to ask of your go-to-market function is, what happened? If you're in the grow stage, you're probably able to ask yourself, well, how did it happen? Why did it happen? And if you're in the scale stage, you're probably able to ask yourself things like, well, what is going to happen? And the reason we like to start most of our conversations here is because most businesses think that they're in a scale stage because the board told them to be, but they're actually in a build or a grow stage, right? And getting this foundation right is going to be crucial, because if you lack what we're just kind of calling bad go-to-market ops or weak go-to-market operations infrastructure, and then you add AI on top of it, you're going to be making very expensive mistakes at scale. And I'm not just talking about burning through Claude tokens, right? That is, the funny LinkedIn example that we hear a lot about. But it's more important than that, right? There's an opportunity cost to getting some of these use cases wrong. So we're going to spend a bit of time on this one slide. It's not very sexy, but I think this is I mean, if you steal anything from this, I would screenshot this, and then you can, obviously make whatever tweaks you want on your own. But the framework that we recommend for stepping into AIs is these 4 steps, starting with getting your go-to-market operations framework dialed. And this is everything that we were just referring to. It's your strategy, process, your systems, your data. So what do we mean by that, right? We are going to talk a lot about this sort of quality data in, right, is quality data out, right? But again, it's more than that now. The problem is if you skip some of this, if you skip building a baseline, you are really going to be adding a really powerful technology on top of a shaky foundation, which means you could be emailing your customer with a email that was meant for a sales rep, right? Or for a prospect. Obviously, that's a problem, right? And so one of the things that PC and I were talking about earlier in kind of prep for this, and also talking about one of our existing customers, is you got to start by having shared definitions, right? I come from more of a, like a true operations and technology background. PC comes from more of a, enablement and strategy background. And for the both of us, right, words really matter, right? And so if we both have a different definition of a marketing qualified lead, and we're using the same agent or the same, new AI tool, we're going to be pointing automation or augmentation at different use cases, which is a problem, right? So you got to start, again, this isn't very sexy, but you need to start with a data glossary and understanding what are the metrics that really matter, what are the KPIs that we care about, and do we all have aligned definitions on these? And you can break this up into groups, right? You're probably going to have your systems folks that need to be talking at a much more technical level about whether they're using HubSpot for the marketing automation platform and Salesforce for the CRM. They need to be talking in sync, but also your marketing, your sales teams, your CS teams. It's likely helpful to do a bit of an infrastructure audit for everything from your marketing operations program, your sales operations, your CS programs, just making sure that everything is dialed, right? And so it's looking at things like your dashboards, your reports, your metrics. Do you have the ability to report on what you need in order to run the business? And then getting your data model design dialed. This part is becoming even more important with the advent of AI that is actually properly working, because one of the big debates we see online, I'm sure you've all seen it and maybe you've been a part of it, is to vibe code your CRM or not to vibe code your CRM. A lot of us here at Domestique kind of laugh when we hear that, just because we know unless you're a mom and pop donut shop, I don't know that you're going to be able to survive actual business growth with a vibe coded CRM, but you can vibe code around it, right? And so getting that data model, data infrastructure in place up front is going to set you up for success later on. The second step is your customer journey. And when the customer journey, when we talk about customer journey, we're talking about 2 specific things. It's both your internal touch points that you have with your prospects and your customers, and it's the external touch points that your customers and your prospects have with you. You need to break that up clearly, right? And what you really want to do is establish all of the touch points along the customer journey, the life cycle stages, your deal stages, to get an understanding of every point that your customer is interacting with you and every point that you're interacting with them. So this is everything from your life cycle stages, your sales process, your stage advancement criteria, getting your opportunity types right, your pipelines dialed. You need to have really clear expectations, and it doesn't necessarily all need to be formally documented, but you need to have a good understanding of all the emails, calls, demos, onboarding, live chatbots, anything that you are interacting with the prospect or customer, you need to have all that clearly documented. And then internally, it's handoffs, approvals, CRM updates, enablement steps. The reason is all of those moments in the customer journey are opportunities to add automation or AI augmentation, right? Now, we're not recommending or even suggesting that you should automate all of them, but you need a starting point to understand what you should automate, which gets us into the third step, which is prioritization, right? Once you've got your go-to-market framework, you've clearly mapped your customer journey, again, both your internal and your external touch points, you're going to have a massive list of potential use cases to focus on. And this is where you need to get, we're calling it an AI council just because we didn't want to get more clever. I'm sure you could come up with a better name. But the idea is you need to get a cross-functional group of stakeholders in a room that meets regularly, that, again, are working from an aligned set of data terms, working from an aligned go-to-market framework. When PC says MQL and I say MQL, we need to be talking about the exact same thing. And then you go down the list and you hyper focus on prioritizing the most value add use cases. And we're gonna provide a little template here in a bit on how we recommend prioritizing. But the idea here is you do not want to burn time, tokens, energy, internal political capital on solving problems that don't need to be solved. One of the biggest mistakes that we're seeing some of our customers make, and that we're just seeing, out in the wild, is folks automating things that don't need to be automated, or building agents for things that don't need agents. PC, I don't know if you're seeing the same thing, or if you're chatting with any customers that are, chasing shiny objects that don't need to be chased, but this is certainly something I'm seeing.
Yeah, I think definitely on that, the shiny object syndrome is very, very real. And I think I see a ton of enthusiasm around AI, and everybody wants to throw themselves into it and build agents and automations that move the needle for their respective organizations. And a lot of folks are taking that individual initiative to do it, which is outstanding. But from like a governance standpoint, an InfoSec standpoint, it's also terrifying because, especially in our world, all of us in RevOps and sales, you're working with client and customer information. And a lot of times I've been working with more organizations who are really reining things in and establishing governance policies and these AI councils to make sure that they pull everything into a unified structure, so they're minimizing their risk exposure, because some scary things can happen when you connect Claude to HubSpot or whatnot. And then the other thing that I would just say real quick with respects to steps 1 and steps 2, what's been really interesting about those is those have been forcing functions that are making organizations clean up their houses and recognize, oh, wait a minute, we actually need to take 5 steps back and establish a shared data glossary so we're all singing from the same choir book. Or, wow, we've got a massive disconnect between what marketing and sales and whomever thinks are important KPIs. So it's taken them backwards, but it allows them to move forward then faster.
Yeah, that's a really thoughtful way of explaining that. And one of the things that we're talking about with some of our more AI forward customers is, like, if you take the time, to your exact point, PC, to get steps 1 and 2 and 3 right here, when you get into step 4, which is, I imagine, why you're all here, the actual implementation, you are going to be set up for success, right? And so part of the skill that you need to be able to develop and part of the story that you need to be able to tell is articulating why you need to lean into steps 1, 2, and 3 before you just start deploying a Claude skill or an agent or cowork or whatever it is at a go-to-market use case, right? If you, and that's the lens that we took when crafting this slide, when crafting the rest of this presentation, is trying to arm operators with the ability to with the tool that will give you hopefully the ability to go back internally into your organizations and say, hey, I'm all about AI-ifying as much of the customer journey as possible, and we can't get a consistent qualified pipeline forecast report in Salesforce. Like, that's a problem. So hopefully we're all aligned on this, and hopefully there's not too much pushback here. Again, if anybody has any questions or clarifying points or pushback, feel free to jump in. So what we're going to do with the rest of the presentation is actually go through each of these and spend a little bit of time on this. And then when we get to the actual AI use cases, we're going to break it up into a few different categories and provide you just some real world examples that we're seeing with some of our customers. So this is not very sexy, but this is incredibly important. So one of the first things you need to be able to do is you need to be able to define your funnel. You need to be able to define what you want to measure. This is nothing crazy. This is just a full funnel from initial ad impression down to close one deal, broken up into, a few different layers of segmentation. But the point here is if you or your team can't create a version of this, within a week, within a few days, you've got larger problems, right? Because you lack the telemetry, whether that's on the systems or the data or the enablement side or the process maybe, to be able to report on this. And if you can't report on, how much stage 2 qualified pipeline you created in March, I don't know that you should be talking about how to deploy AI across go-to-market. That's a prerequisite. So part of this is just a bit of a gut check, right? You don't need to use this exact example, but whatever your funnel looks like, a gut check is go internally, ask your team to build you a full funnel analysis for the current year to date. And if it takes them, more than a week, that's a problem. The second thing is a data glossary, right? You need to be speaking the same language. So we picked some, less common examples here. This is a part of a huge document that we have. But essentially the idea is you need whatever the business term is, right? You need a definition in PC. This is where your enablement skill comes in, right? Is you need shared definitions across the teams. What altitude is this flying at? Is this the executive leadership team? Is this board? Is this BDR? Is this operations, right? Where is this flying? What is the current system of record? This is really important. What is the source of truth for the current system of record, the future system of record? And then what is that sort of reporting source of truth for this metric? Maybe it's your CRM, maybe it's your marketing automation platform, maybe it's NetSuite. This part is really, really important. PC, do you have any tips? I'm just gonna, trial by fire here with you. Do you have any tips on how organizations, specifically ones that are trying to work cross-functionally, right? How organizations can get alignment on, a shared set of definitions? I know that this is a problem that you've helped solve before.
Yeah, novel concept is communication. And, I live by the RACI framework. And I think, when we're engaging with folks and we're proactively bringing this up and helping them A lot of folks are doing this for the first time, so they don't know what they don't know, and they don't know who they should talk to and what landmines are coming their way. And so the fact that we've seen this movie a few times, we know, hey, you're building towards this outcome. These are the folks that you're going to want to talk to. These are the questions that we're going to need to ask to ensure that we can build a system with AI in mind that can scale. And this is who we need to talk to and why it's important that we talk to them. And what we found is a lot of folks, it's not that they're not communicating because they don't want to, is everybody is so focused on their swim lane that they don't really widen that aperture until something goes wrong, or until it's, hey, we're ready to sign off on this, and Chuck from finance goes, whoa, wait a minute, I wasn't even aware of this. Our billing system doesn't integrate with that.
Yep.
So
yeah, can't AFI that part, which I love. You got to actually get in the room and have a conversation. Okay, in classic Domestique fashion, we're just incredibly behind. So I'm gonna keep moving here. Customer journey. Again, you need to map internal and external touch points. Something we're trying to do a better job in these webinars is just like actually showing you some real world examples here. So here's one. So again, we've got our customer journey over here on the right. We've got the framework over here on the right. We're focusing on the onboard stage here, right? So you've just closed won a deal. Now what? This is actually our internal stage advancement criteria. This is our sort of internal customer activities, Domestique touch points. What happens when we close one new business deal, right? Again, this is all codified in our systems, and we're using AI to streamline a few of these things here. But these are the actual items that happen. So what we're doing here is we said, okay, well, what are the customer activities that are happening during this stage? Well, they need to attend our kickoff call. They need to provide us, maybe it's PC, Abby, and Alex. They need to provide us systems access to whatever their go-to-market systems are. That could be incredibly easy, or that could take a month. We need to align on our operating cadence. They need to provide key stakeholder intros. Okay, great. What can we use? What can we point AI at there to help speed things up, right? Maybe it's something like a prompt that forces us internally to confirm that we have all the systems access we need within 48 hours of kickoff, right? That's an example. What are all the touch points that we have? Well, we need to host that kickoff meeting. We need to schedule the weekly status call, schedule this. So, there's all of these specific items here. Right now, we obviously have a lot more prep that we need to do. And then it's okay. Now that we have both of those mapped, we literally have a document. I mean, it's hundreds of rows long, and it's essentially from the moment we close a deal through renewing, expanding, offboarding a customer. What are all of the customer touch points? What are all of our touch points? And then we've got, essentially all these different columns. One of the columns is, can we automate or augment this with AI or a system? A lot of times, no, you can't. You just need to have a conversation with somebody, and we don't want to replace that. But sometimes you can, right? So part of what we're doing here is this isn't just an exercise to get, to document this. What you're doing is you're creating the repository that you are eventually going to use to prioritize all of your potential use cases. Otherwise, you're just pointing AI at random shiny objects. So two critical things, two prerequisites you need to be able to pull this off. One is your customer journey, right? We purposefully chose the sort of most basic one that ideally everybody here is familiar with, right? These are your life cycle stages, right? We've got a lot, clearly documented here, but you don't need all of this, but you do need a version of this, right? So what is your life cycle stage? What does your full funnel look like? And then what are your deal stages, right? You need the same thing for your sales funnel. And again, in both of these examples, right, we're talking about what's the source system of record, what are the key activities that are happening along the way, right? Again, same thing here. What are the entrance criteria, activities that are happening? You can do entrance or exit, it doesn't matter. And then what are the customer outcomes that they're expecting along the way? This is your scaffolding, right? If you have these two things here, your deal stages, your full funnel defined, then you can start to map all of the touch points, right? This is, to PC's point earlier, right? This is that sort of non-sexy work up front that you have to have in place in order to be able to do the rest of this really well. PC, I know that you're in the middle of, let's say, some robust customer journey builds right now, with some high profile, high growth clients right now. What are some maybe trends or insights that you're seeing from some of these companies that you're working with as they're trying to build a customer journey, or maybe let's say rebuild the infrastructure for a customer journey in this new world of AI? Like, what are you seeing?
Yeah, I think if you go to the next slide, that's a good one. Actually, go to the next one. So a lot of people are really trying to solve for broken handoffs. And, at the top of the funnel, it's how do we ensure, everybody wants more leads because it's really, really difficult right now. So how do we ensure that we're hitting the right people? How do we streamline that process so we can do more with the same number of headcount that we have? But then how can we solve for broken handoffs, especially when it comes to the sales to CS handoff? And then the last part is nobody likes to do admin work, right? Nobody likes to pay for project management hours. AEs don't like to do admin work, and sales leaders don't like their AEs doing admin work because that's less time that they have to spend actively selling. And so as you're going through the customer verifiable outcomes and the entrance and exit criteria, it's looking at how can we use AI to speed this up exponentially so our sales team can spend more time selling and less time spending 8 hours putting together a proposal, right? So it's a huge part of it is just operational efficiency. Which is not surprising.
Agreed. So this leads into, usually this is either the quickest or the most time consuming part, which is ironic, and it depends on how aligned you are as an organization. So you've got the basics, let's say. You've got the scaffolding for your go-to-market infrastructure built. It's in place. You've got your strategy, process, systems, data, enablement. You're aligned. You've got at least a starting point for your data glossary. You know what you're trying to measure. You know the touch points that your customers have with you. You know that the touch points that you have with your customers. It's all mapped out. Obviously, I'm painting an incredibly idyllic scenario here, but let's say you've even got a version of this. Okay, great. Now that you have all that mapped out, again, the whole reason we're here is, well, how do I point AI at this? You got to start with prioritization, right? It is very easy to point AI at things that don't matter, to check a box and say, look, I built this thing, I built this app, I built this, I gotta be careful with how I say this next part. I was at a conference recently in San Francisco it was a global RevOps conference. It was great. Lots of talented speakers and big wigs in our industry. And on the drive home, when I called Rhys, my co-founder here, I told him, I was just like, man, I think we're on the right track, because a lot of what I'm seeing and a lot of what I saw, in these bigger industry presentations, was a lot of point solutions. It was a lot of, look at this cool app over here that I built that solves this one specific thing. It's like, okay, great. But is it a part of a broader go-to-market strategy? Are you actually, PC, to your exact point, are you actually giving time back to sellers to do more selling? Or did you just AIify a use case that nobody asked you to, right? So part of what we're trying to do here, again, this is not a very sexy example. It's not meant to be. It's meant to be something practical that you could take away. But part of what we're trying to do here is give you a framework to force your organization to have the harder conversations. So you got to prioritize your potential use cases, your potential workflows. So you've appointed your AI council, right? I strongly encourage you that if you're going to roll this out or advocate for rolling this out at your organization, you need depth and breadth. What I mean is you need folks across the entire customer journey, but you also need folks that fly at all of the altitudes. This can't just be an executive leadership team conversation. You need the in the trenches people doing the actual work to gut check. So this is going to be you can think of this as like an OKR group, right? And then the idea would be, and again, we've just highlighted a few examples here, but the idea would be, depending on how well and how thorough you've done the previous steps that we've talked about, this sheet might be hundreds of rows. It might be thousands of rows, right? And the idea is, okay, great. What are all the opportunities that we have to deploy AI here? So here's a basic framework that we use. You can steal this, you can tweak this, right? But the idea is you've got this sort of level of effort, level of impact, right? And you've got your time costs, number of team members impacted, impact to revenue, right? The idea here is you just need to gut check, like, is this giving us more time back, or is this costing us revenue, or is it both, right? So the idea here is that if you have enough folks from across the entire customer journey and from systems admins and BDRs all the way up to the big wigs, you should be able to argue your way through this. This is just a quick example, but strongly recommend that you do this. PC, one of the things that we talk about a lot internally, even just with us internally and not necessarily with our customers, right, is like this level of impact point, right? It's like focusing our efforts on the highest impact use cases. How do you think about guiding some of your customers and some of your clients through focusing on impact and not just speed? Because I know that we have a lot of customers that are like, I just want to move quickly. I want to focus on deploying AI by the end of next week because my board is up my ass or my boss said so. Like, how do you guide those conversations and try to get them to focus on, yes, and we need to focus on impact? Yeah.
I mean, I always, if I can, like to come back to the data and use the data to support that we're solving the right problems. A lot of folks have a ready, fire, aim, and they think they're solving the right problems, and in fact that they're not, and the data would suggest that they're not. Also, making sure that you're talking to the team and understanding where's going to have the impact. And it's funny, over the course of the last few months, thinking a lot about the positive impact, but more and more I'm thinking about what is the negative impact of getting it wrong and kind of these unintended consequences. And a good example of that I'm seeing a lot of is, especially in post-meeting follow-ups, is that a lot of this is driving so much efficiency, but it's coming at kind of this cost of cognitive due diligence, for lack of a better term, where, reps or, project managers, you name it, are putting blind faith in a note taker or Claude, and they're not, as a result, they're not they're not taking the time to know their opportunities as well as they should. And so
Mm-hmm.
they're missing mistakes in the communication, and in fact, their AI is actually making it take longer. I don't know about anybody here,
Yeah.
but I know that I'll have AI help me organize my thoughts into an email, and then I'll spend twice as long editing and polishing the email than if I just would have wrote the thing myself, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
removing all
Yeah.
M dashes. And there's
Oh my
nothing
gosh.
worse
Totally.
than when you get everybody here has been on the receiving end of outreach from a sales rep, and like, this is clearly written by AI.
Yeah.
They didn't even make an attempt to humanize it. And so, like, I'll go in and add typos and
Yeah.
poor punctuation, just like, no, I'm a human, I swear.
I love
Um,
that.
but then they
My
know it's
my
not me because they know I'm not that intelligent. So, like, this
that's
is too well
well,
written to be
that's
sent
right.
from
That's right.
PC.
I love that. 2 points you made there. One point, this is a total aside, but it is a pet peeve of mine. I hate that AI has killed the M dash for all of us. I used to use that all the time, and now I can't, and that's just a personal gripe of mine. But the main point that you said, which I really agree with, is you got to bring it back to the data, right? Especially the folks in this room, the folks that are watching the recording, right? It's like, yeah, exactly. If you want to advocate for or against a use case, right, you got to be able to point it back to the impact, got to be able to use data to be able to do that. So this is why we started this whole thing with like this slide. Again, it's not very sexy. It's just a Google sheet, but you need to have a baseline of what are you measuring? What's the performance? Where are we behind? Where are we ahead? Where are the hot spots? This informs everything else. So I love that you went there. So get the right people in a room. You need breadth. You need depth, and then you need to have a ruthlessly pragmatic conversation about where you're going to focus your time. So, okay, we're going to talk through some very specific use cases. We're going to get granular with these to try to show you some real world examples of how some of our customers and how us internally are deploying AI currently. So we're going to talk through a couple different types of use cases. We're going to talk go-to-market execution, which is running the actual go-to-market motions themselves. So think sales motions, content creation, outbound sequences, campaigns. And then go-to-market operations, which is the infrastructure, the scaffolding that makes all of the execution possible. So it's your systems, your data architecture, all the enablement work that you use to run your place. So we want to clearly break these up. We're going to break this down into system native AI use cases and then custom one-off ones. Again, I think these are two fundamentally different types of use cases. So one of the first ones, we're starting with native go-to-market operations. I stole these slides from Connor, our HubSpot service lead. So thank you, Connor, if you're watching this. HubSpot has recently rolled out some new functionality through Data Agent and the ability to prompt into certain smart properties that allow you to extract a lot more subjective and objective value from your CRM. So the example here is deal source data, right? It is one of the fields, one of the types of data that every operator craves, accurate deal source information. And it's always a problem. It's always a fight between marketing and sales, right? And the problem is historically, you've got either humans or if-then statements through workflows deciding what gets the credit. And there's obvious problems with both of those. If your sales team is responsible for manually saying where a deal came from, where do you think they're all going to come from? Sales outbound. But the problem is if you have a workflow doing it, you are limited to the operator's ability to craft a comprehensive set of if-then statements. So instead, what we do is we build some sub-properties here called AI deal source context, AI deal source detail, AI deal source confidence, and AI deal source reasoning. We're going to walk through a couple steps of how to actually pull this off, but the idea is you can prompt into the entire database and it will look at everything. So it'll look, and I'll just show you here. This is the prompt that we recommend starting with. You're gonna want to tweak this, right? This is meant to be broadly applicable, but the idea is you can look at contact activity and lifecycle history, form submissions, landing pages, emails, paid and organic campaign data, sales rep activity, which could include meeting notes, meeting summaries, call transcripts, right? Referrals, relationships, but also CRM level activity. So you can tell this agent to look at literally everything that is happening around PC, the executive stakeholder, the economic buyer at this key deal. What it'll do then is over a series of a couple of workflows, and again, we're going to send out the deck. You don't need to memorize any of this. Well, what it'll do is it will fill in all of those specific properties, right? It'll give you the context. It'll give you the reasoning. It'll give you the confidence score that it has. And it'll give you this sort of 2 to 4 sentence summary of where it thinks the deal actually came from. And the idea is that all of a sudden, you still have your standard deal source attribution data that you've been reporting on, but now you've got AI providing a much more comprehensive gut check to it. And if you can build some broken window dashboards around what is your sort of if-then workflow saying and what is AI saying, it's going to highlight gaps in your process, gaps in your systems, gaps in your data, right? So again, we've got these workflows are very simple. The process is very simple, and you can do this natively within HubSpot. So if you're interested in this, we've got a whole playbook on this. I'm happy to send it over to you. I'm going to move pretty quickly through these next few because we have kind of a lot, and I want to make sure that we get to all of them. Okay, the second one, a lot of you will be familiar with this, is a native use case, again in HubSpot on the go-to-market execution side. Prospecting agent. When this first came out last fall of 2025, it sucked. It was not valuable. It was generic. It was cheesy. The writing was terrible. If you asked it to use your brand voice, and if your brand voice was at all sarcastic, it was Deadpool 3 times 10. I mean, it was over the top. It has come a long way. It really has. And we've used it, we've deployed it with plenty of our customers. And this is one of those things that can be a 1 + 1 is 3 for specifically for a building or a growing customer, a building or growing company, rather. The idea is that, again, it will look at all of your CRM data, not just a specific workflow. It'll look at all of the business context it has within the CRM, for Shane, the qualified prospect, and it'll look at the activity that Shane has been doing, the blog that he's reading about, if he's had a conversation with one of our sales reps, and it will craft a very specific message, and maybe even a sequence of messages to Shane. And you can set the parameters for the goal that you're trying to accomplish, right? Maybe it's, I want to book a meeting with Shane, or I want to send Shane an ebook, or whatever it is. So not that hard to set up. We've got a whole other webinar around this. If you're interested, I highly encourage you, check it out. I'm going to skip through some of this just because this is basically proof that it works. So custom use cases. This is probably where a lot of you are starting to play. So we're going to start on the go-to-market execution side. Prospecting agent. When this first came out last fall of 2025, it sucked. It was not valuable. It was generic. It was cheesy. The writing was terrible. If you asked it to use your brand voice, and if your brand voice was at all sarcastic, it was Deadpool 3 times 10. I mean, it was over the top. It has come a long way. It really has. And we've got Account prioritization and signal detection. This is a great one. We've done this with a few of our customers, right? So you can have account scoring models in your CRM, whether it's Salesforce or HubSpot or whatever you're using. But the problem is reps still prioritize accounts based on whoever contacted them last and whatever their gut feel is, right? And so whether you're using Claude or OpenAI or whatever you're using, you can use these different models now to reference, again, the go-to-market infrastructure that you've already built, because we've established that for the previous 45 minutes of this conversation. You can point, again, whether it's Claude or OpenAI, whatever you're using, at your target account list from your CRM. It'll score them against your firmographic fit, your ICP patterns, and again, look at, well, where is your ICP actually converting throughout your funnel? And it will go out and it will do that outbound research, looking for funding, hiring surges, leadership changes, press releases around the new product feature, and it will essentially take your target account list for your rep and it will real time rank it based on the essentially the highest percent likelihood to have a signal that might indicate that they might be ready for a conversation. This obviously requires quite a bit of tweaking up front, but this works. This is live. This happens. We've done this. This is a screenshot from a customer of ours. So it works. Another one, we talked about the native way to do prospecting using AI and using a native tool. There's also custom ways of doing it. So again, this example here is Claude. It's the same account list as before. It'll identify your top 5 accounts for the week or the month, whatever it is. And it'll map out 5 contacts that you're trying to reach out to. Now, again, this requires you having clarity around who are your target accounts, who are the personas at those accounts that you're trying to reach out to. But if you have that, it will give you, either you, the rep, or you, the sales manager, or the RevOps person, an indication of how those accounts are progressing. Because one of the biggest mistakes that we see companies make is they measure outbound effectiveness, sales effectiveness, by measuring their activities, right? And activity does not equal pipeline progression. It doesn't equal movement, right? And so what this will ideally do, again, it takes tweaking, it takes you getting the details right. But what it tries to do is tries to get you to focus on intent signals. Again, you can now do this with AI if you have the proper infrastructure and scaffolding in place. So think about running, whether you're a go-to-market leader like a head of sales, you're a founder of a high-growth early-stage company, or you're a revenue operations director responsible for this big global company. When you're going into your weekly pipeline call, your weekly forecasting call, right? And you're trying to get a no BS gut check on where your deals actually sit. Something like this would actually be incredibly valuable, because if you're just looking at, well, the deal stage is in stage 3 and the last activity date was yesterday, so okay, we're clearly running our play. There's context that you're missing, right? The way that we'll talk about internally is you're leaving context on the table. You're leaving IQ points on the table. Okay. Go-to-market operations. So moving away from go-to-market execution into operations. We're going to talk through a couple of custom AI use cases. This one might be the least sexy one, and yet it saved us a ton of time and headache internally. So this is something that we used. So we are a HubSpot shop. We use HubSpot, Slack, and we're a Google Workspace company. And so all of our calls with prospects internally, with our account teams, with our customers, we've got Gemini running in the background to take notes. The problem is when those call transcripts end, or when the calls end, the call transcripts get dropped into my personal drive, my personal Google Drive. AI can't access that. The team can't access that. PC can't access that. So we need to, in an automated and highly effective way, move those transcripts from my drive personally to wherever the client folder is so that it can be accessible for the account managers or the broader account teams or the different account plays that we're trying to run. And so we built this entire Google script, which is basically just a ton of code that I don't have the technical skill to create from scratch. But we used Claude to prompt our way into this. And yeah, it took a few iterations, but this worked perfectly. And now we've deployed it across the entire organization. And now every single prospect and customer has a very clear call summary folder within our database, which allows us to be incredibly organized, right? Like, again, this is not a sexy example, but for us, for our business, it's made a massive impact. What are some other use cases that you all might have, right? And again, this goes back to the prioritization point. You got to be clear about where the impact is. For us, this was high impact. Not very cool, not very sleek, but very high impact. We got a couple more here. Deal risk and early warning. I can't think of a company that doesn't want a version of this, right? So the idea would be you can deploy AI to monitor deal activity across a specific pipeline. If you're breaking up deals into a sales pipeline, renewal pipeline, expansion pipeline, I recommend having them specific to a pipeline because you're going to be looking for different signals. But it can surface risks by deal. You can summarize that by deal owner. Are there trends, right? Maybe Alex, the rep, isn't doing a good enough job of multi-threading, right? Which we've identified because through AI, we've identified this because there's a common thread where Alex tends to lose deals at stage 4. Why are we losing deals at stage 4? Well, he doesn't have a contact that is associated with the deal that is tagged as the economic buyer. Okay, boom. That's a coaching moment for Alex, the rep, right? And again, this is where the combo of, the human revenue operator and AI really comes into play because you can't just deploy AI at this and expect it to work. You need the human looking at all of this to identify these patterns and then deploy the coaching, right? So if PC is leading, enablement, right? And I'm the RevOps guy, and I start to see a trend where, hey, Abby's not doing a good enough job of identifying economic buyers for her deals. Like, how do we, but she's crushing, the solution design, the discovery, but she's just dropping the ball here. Like, how do we work on coaching her for this? What can we do further up the funnel to impact Abby's close rates? Like, this is such a real world example that we use, that some of our clients use. And again, it's not about replacing the human, it's about adding value to them, right? So instead of needing to go hire a junior level, analyst, right? Instead, you can have the more senior operator looking across everything. So this is,
Alex, to that
please.
point, too, like, it is so easy, and everybody wants to focus on new business. But I think, with the economy, over the last couple of years, more and more clients are focused on retention. And yet they have no canary in the coal mine to stay on top of potential renewal or churn risk or upsell and expansion opportunities, because many CSMs, account managers, they're not wired to sell, and it's very uncomfortable. And so they may not recognize the signals that would suggest, hey, this customer could really benefit from this product, etc. And so seeing more and more CS orgs really start holding their hands out and saying, hey, we want some of these tools too. And actually, in some cases, recommending that they prioritize those over, say, some new business tools.
Amen to that. We are definitely seeing that trend across the board. Yeah. I love that. That's great. Cloud in the coal mine. I'm going to steal that and pretend it was mine. Thank you for giving that to me, Shane. Okay. We got just a couple minutes left here. In classic Domestique fashion, we didn't leave nearly enough time for questions. What questions, comments, pushback does anybody have? There's obviously a lot here, but hopefully you can steal something and deploy it at your business. Any questions? Any pushback? Any comments? Any specific use cases that you want to dive into?
If I could add one more thing, Alex, real quick.
Please.
Right now with Claude, especially, it's like ChatGPT never existed, but ChatGPT is doing some pretty cool stuff with their agent builder. But right now, like the temptation, and we're hearing it everywhere, is I don't need SaaS tools. I'm just going to build it myself. And just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. And so really internally look at, should we build or should we buy? And, if it involves very sensitive, critical data, consider buying. If you need immediate time to value, buy. One thing that, that we do a good job focusing on here is version control. How many prompts are issued or tools, and then nobody updates it, right? And so a lot of orgs will be doing that, but then it just kind of, it dies on the vine. So it's okay to buy tools. And in some cases, it's going to be cheaper in the long run.
Agreed. Cool. Well, that's all we got, everybody. Thank you very much for the time. I appreciate you all showing up. Appreciate the commentary. And thank you, Zach. There's a lot of templates and frameworks in this presentation. And so if you want one of them, or if you think they'd be helpful, go ahead and shoot me an email, alex@domestique.info. Didn't want to buy domestique.com, didn't want to fight the owner of it. So go ahead and shoot me an email, alex@domestique.info. Happy to send over whatever would be helpful. Happy to jump on a call and talk through any of your specific use cases. But hopefully that framework is helpful to step into it, right? If you're getting pressure from the board, from the executive team, from your CEO, from whoever, to just deploy AI across everything, great. And try to do it in a thoughtful way, so that you're not adding, gas to a fire that they'll be asking you to put out in 6 months. So thank you for the time. Appreciate it. And I'll see you all in the next one. Thanks, everybody.